The tape had been hidden for nearly 30 years, filed away in a dusty archive labeled simply, "Not for broadcast." Now it was about to reveal a truth that would forever change how the world saw its greatest basketball hero. Mia Rodriguez wiped the dust off another box of old videotapes. Her back ached from bending over the storage bins in WGN-TV's basement archives for the past 3 hours. As the newest sports journalist at the Chicago station, she'd been assigned the worst job, organizing decades of forgotten footage. "Find anything interesting down there?" called Eddie, the station's elderly security guard who had worked at WGN since before the Bulls' first championship. "Just a bunch of boring city council meetings from the 80s, Mia replied, pushing her dark hair away from her face. "And about 1,000,000 Cubs games," Eddie laughed. "Keep digging. There's gold in them hills. That's what my daddy used to say." Mia smiled politely and returned to her work. She had grown up in Chicago's South Side, watching Bulls games with her father in their tiny apartment. While other girls had posters of boy bands on their walls, Mia had Michael Jordan soaring through the air, tongue out, ball in hand. She'd studied journalism at Northwestern with dreams of becoming a sports reporter. But here she was, 5 years after graduation, still paying her dues. She pulled another dusty box from the shelf, labeled 1996 Sports Misc. Inside were several tapes in plastic cases with handwritten labels. Most were regular game highlights and post-game interviews. Nothing special. Then, at the bottom of the box, she found it. The tape's label was different from the others. Instead of the standard WGN format, this one had red letters written in marker. Jordan interview, June 16, 1996. Not for broadcast. Mia's heart skipped. June 16, 1996. That was right after the Bulls had won their 4th championship, beating the Seattle Supersonics. It was during their historic 72-10 season, still considered one of the greatest team performances in NBA history. But what did "not for broadcast" mean? And why would an interview with Michael Jordan, the biggest sports star on the planet, never air? She slipped the tape into her bag without thinking. It wasn't stealing, she told herself. She was just borrowing it to see what was on it. She'd bring it back tomorrow. "Find anything good?" Eddie asked as she headed for the elevator. "Nah," she lied. "Just more old Cubs losses." That night in her apartment, Mia stared at the tape on her coffee table. She still had an old VHS player connected to her TV, a relic from her college days that she kept for watching her dad's collection of old Bulls games. She poured herself a glass of wine, took a deep breath, and pushed the tape into the player. Static filled the screen before, clearing to show a familiar studio setup. 2 chairs angled toward each other, plants in the background, standard interview setting, and there was Michael Jordan, sitting in one of the chairs. Mia leaned forward, nearly spilling her wine. Something was different about him. This wasn't the smooth, confident Jordan she remembered seeing in interviews. He looked tired. His eyes were red. His shoulders were slumped slightly forward. The camera pulled back to show the interviewer, Tom Hannigan, a legendary Chicago reporter who had covered the Bulls since the franchise began. Hannigan had died in 2008, Mia remembered. Heart attack. "Michael, thank you for sitting down with us today," Hannigan said. "It's been quite a season." Jordan nodded. "Thanks for having me, Tom." 4 championships now, the greatest regular season in NBA history. You're back on top of the basketball world after your return from baseball. How does it feel? Jordan was quiet for a moment. Too long for a normal interview pause. Mia could see Hannigan shift uncomfortably in his seat. "It feels..." Jordan started, then stopped. He looked directly at the camera, then back at Hannigan. "Can we start over?" The tape jumped ahead. Same setting, but Jordan looked more composed. 4 championships now. The greatest regular season in NBA history. You're back on top of the basketball world after your return from baseball. How does it feel? It feels good, Jordan said, but his voice was flat. Winning always feels good. But this one must be special, Hannigan pressed, after everything you've been through. Something changed in Jordan's expression. A crack in the famous Jordan armor. Yeah, this one's different, he said quietly. Because of your father? Hannigan asked. The camera zoomed in on Jordan's face. Mia held her breath. You know, Tom, everyone thinks they know my story, Jordan said. They think they know why I left basketball, why I came back. They think they know who I am. And they don't? Hannigan asked. Not even close, Jordan said. The interview continued, but Mia was barely breathing. This wasn't the polished, corporate Michael Jordan she'd seen in commercials and standard interviews. This was raw, real. Suddenly, her phone rang, startling her. It was her editor, Dan. Hey, boss, she answered, pausing the tape. Rodriguez, I need that piece on the Bears' new defensive coach by tomorrow morning, Dan barked. It's almost done, Mia lied, glancing at her laptop, where the unfinished article sat with just 3 paragraphs written. It better be. And don't forget, I want that archive inventory on my desk by Friday. After she hung up, Mia stared at the frozen image of Jordan on her TV screen. An idea began to form. What if this interview contained something so personal, so revealing, that it never aired? What if it showed a side of the greatest basketball player ever that no one had seen before? She grabbed her laptop and started typing a new document. Not the Bears article, but a pitch to Dan. Michael Jordan's lost interview. The truth finally revealed. If she could verify this tape's authenticity, track down why it was never broadcast, and put the pieces together, this could be more than just an article. This could make her career. Mia pressed play again, watching as Jordan began to talk about his father's murder in 1993, how it had nearly destroyed him. He mentioned a promise he had made that no one knew about. What promise? Hannigan asked. Jordan looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, Mia felt like he was looking right at her, across the decades. That's what no one understands, Jordan said. That's what changed everything. Mia grabbed her notebook and began frantically writing. Whatever this promise was, she was going to find out. Even if it meant digging through every archive, tracking down every person connected to that interview. The truth about Michael Jordan, the real Michael Jordan, was sitting on a forgotten tape, and she was the only one who knew. Mia barely slept that night. When her alarm buzzed at 6 a.m., she was already awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of Jordan's face from that interview, vulnerable, raw, almost wounded, wouldn't leave her mind. She showered quickly, grabbed her laptop and the precious tape, and headed to the office early. The newsroom was nearly empty when she arrived, just how she wanted it. She needed to use the station's editing bay, which had better equipment for viewing old tapes. Once inside the small room, she locked the door and carefully inserted the VHS into the professional player. The image was clearer here than on her home TV. She fast-forwarded to where she'd left off the night before. That promise changed everything, Jordan was saying to Tom Hannigan. The interviewer leaned forward, his expression serious. Can you tell us about it? Hannigan asked gently. Jordan looked down at his hands. They were massive, of course. The hands that had held 6 championship trophies, that had palmed basketballs like oranges. But now, they seemed to tremble slightly. After Dad died, Jordan began, his voice lower than before. I was lost. Everyone knows I quit basketball to play baseball because it was Dad's dream for me. But what they don't know is that I almost never came back to the NBA at all. Mia's breath caught. This was news. Jordan's return to basketball in 1995 with the simple press release stating, "I'm back," was famous. But the idea that he might never have returned? That was something no one had heard before. "What made you decide to come back?" Hannigan asked. Jordan's eyes seemed to look through the camera into some distant memory. "People think they know why I'm so competitive," he said. "They think it's just how I'm wired. But after the championships, after all the Nike deals and the fame, none of that was pushing me anymore. I needed something else, something more important." He paused, and Mia could see him deciding how much to share. "The Bulls were still my team," Jordan continued, "but basketball felt empty without my father watching. I needed a reason bigger than myself to come back." Hannigan nodded, remaining silent, allowing Jordan the space to continue. "When I was playing baseball in Birmingham, I'd drive around sometimes just to clear my head. One day I found myself at this playground in a rough neighborhood. Some kids were playing basketball, with a milk crate nailed to a telephone pole." Jordan smiled slightly at the memory. "I stopped and played with them. No cameras, no reporters, just pick-up basketball like when I was a kid. That's when I felt something real again." Mia leaned closer to the screen, captivated. "One of those afternoons, I met this kid, 11 years old, skinny as a rail. Had an old Bulls jersey on, my jersey, but it was way too big for him. Kid could barely dribble, but he had this determination." Jordan's voice caught slightly. He cleared his throat. "Anyway, we got to talking. Turns out he was sick. Really sick. But he told me watching me play gave him strength during his treatments. Said on his worst days, he'd watch tapes of Bulls games and imagine he could be strong like me someday." The camera zoomed in on Jordan's face. His famous eyes, usually so intense and competitive, now glistened with what looked like unshed tears. That hit me hard, you know? Here I was feeling sorry for myself, and this kid was fighting for his life, using me as inspiration. It made me realize I wasn't just playing for myself. "And that's when you made the promise?" Hannigan asked softly. Jordan nodded. "I told him I'd go back to the Bulls, that I'd win another championship, not just for me or for my dad, but for him too. I promised him I'd—" The image suddenly dissolved into static. Mia frantically adjusted the tracking on the VCR, trying to clear the picture. After a few seconds, the image returned, but the conversation had moved on. "Nobody knew that side of me," Jordan was saying. "The public Michael Jordan is different from the private one." "How so?" Hannigan asked. "People see the dunks, the championships, the competitive guy who hates losing, but they don't see the pressure. Do you know what it's like to never be able to have a bad day? To know that millions of kids are watching your every move?" Jordan's voice had an edge Mia had never heard before. "Before games, I'd sometimes have these, I guess you'd call them panic attacks. I'd be in the bathroom stall in the locker room, throwing up from anxiety. Then I'd wash my face, walk out, and become Michael Jordan again." Mia gasped. This was Michael Jordan, the untouchable, unflappable greatest of all time, admitting to panic attacks? This would have been shocking in 1996, when athletes rarely discussed mental health. Even now, it was a revelation. "Did your teammates know?" Hannigan asked. "Nobody knew," Jordan said firmly. "Not even Scotty. After games, sometimes I'd sit in my car in the parking lot for an hour, hands shaking so bad I couldn't drive home. All while people thought I was living the perfect life." Hannigan was silent for a moment, clearly processing what he was hearing. "Why? Are you telling us this now, Michael? Jordan looked directly into the camera again, his gaze piercing. Because I'm tired of the myth. I'm human. I break. I doubt. And I want kids out there to know that's okay. That even Michael Jordan. The door to the editing bay suddenly burst open. Mia jumped, quickly hitting pause on the tape. Rodriguez, what are you doing in here? Dan, her editor, stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, looking annoyed. The Bears. Peace better be on my desk. Mia's mind raced. Should she tell him about the tape, or keep this treasure to herself a little longer? Actually, Dan, she said, making a split-second decision, I have something bigger. Much bigger than the Bears. Dan crossed his arms, skepticism written across his face. Bigger than the Bears? In Chicago? This better be good, Rodriguez. Mia took a deep breath and gestured to the frozen image of Michael Jordan on the screen. I found an interview with Michael Jordan from 1996 that never aired. He's talking about things he never discussed publicly. Panic attacks before games, his struggles after his father's murder, and some promise he made that made him return to basketball. This isn't the Michael Jordan people think they know. Dan's expression changed from skepticism to curiosity. He stepped into the editing bay and closed the door behind him. Show me, he said. Mia played a few clips from the interview. With each revelation from Jordan, Dan's eyes widened. Where did you find this? He asked when she paused the tape. In the archive basement. The label says, not for broadcast. It was buried in a box of miscellaneous footage from 1996. Dan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Tom Hannigan, he murmured, recognizing the interviewer. I worked with him when I first started here. Good man. One of the best in the business. Do you know why this interview never aired? Mia asked. Dan shook his head. No idea. But if what Jordan's saying is true... He trailed off, lost in thought. Then his reporter's instincts kicked in. We need to verify this is authentic before we do anything with it. And we need to understand why it was shelved. Let me investigate, Mia said eagerly. I can track down people who worked at the station. Back then, maybe find Hannigan's notes. Slow down, Dan interrupted. This could be huge, but it could also be nothing. Maybe Jordan's team pulled it because he said too much. Maybe it was just a technical issue. Or maybe someone wanted to protect Jordan's image, Mia countered. The perfect basketball hero with no weaknesses. Dan considered this. You have 2 weeks, he finally said. Find out everything you can about this interview. Why it was recorded, why it never aired, and, most importantly, if it's real. But keep working on your regular assignments too. And Rodriguez? Yes? Don't tell anyone else about this yet. Not even the other reporters. After Dan left, Mia made a digital copy of the interview and carefully returned the original tape to her bag. Her mind was already racing, making a list of people to contact. Her first step was researching Tom Hannigan. A few online searches revealed he had been a fixture in Chicago sports journalism for over 30 years before his death in 2008. Heart attack at age 67. He'd covered the Bulls from their early days, through the lean years, and into the Jordan era. There were photos of him with a young Jordan at practice, with coach Phil Jackson, with owner Jerry Reinsdorf. Hannigan had won several local Emmy Awards and was beloved in Chicago media circles. But the most important information Mia found was his wife's name, Eleanor Hannigan. After more searching, Mia discovered that Eleanor still lived in Oak Park, a suburb just west of Chicago. She found a phone number and, with nervous fingers, dialed it. Hello? Answered an elderly female voice. Mrs. Hannigan? My name is Mia Rodriguez. I'm a reporter with WGN. I'm calling about your husband, Tom. There was a pause. "It's been a long time since anyone from the station called about Tom," Eleanor said. "What's this regarding?" "I found an interview he conducted with Michael Jordan. In 1996, that never aired." "I'm trying to understand why." Another longer pause. "That interview," Eleanor finally said, her voice suddenly heavy with emotion. "I remember it well. It troubled Tom greatly that it never saw the light of day." Mia's heart raced. "Would it be possible for me to speak with you about it? In person?" "Yes," Eleanor said after a moment. "Yes, I think Tom would have wanted that. Can you come tomorrow afternoon?" The next day, Mia drove to Oak Park, a neighborhood of beautiful old homes with wide porches and mature trees. Eleanor Hannigan's house was a modest two-story brick home with flower pots lining the steps. Eleanor was in her early 80s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She welcomed Mia into a living room, filled with framed photographs, many showing Tom Hannigan with famous Chicago sports figures over the decades. "That's Tom with Ernie Banks," Eleanor said, noticing Mia looking at the photos. "And there he is with Michael, after the Bulls won their first championship." The photo showed a younger Hannigan with his arm around a beaming Jordan, champagne dripping from his championship cap. "Your husband knew Jordan well?" Mia asked. "As well as any reporter did," Eleanor replied, settling into an armchair and gesturing for Mia to sit. "Michael trusted Tom because Tom never sensationalized things. He respected privacy, but told the UTI truth." "Then why did the Jordan interview from June 1996 never air?" Mia asked. Eleanor's expression darkened. "Politics, money, the usual reasons truth gets buried." She leaned forward. "What exactly did you see on that tape?" Mia described the portions of the interview she had watched. With each detail, Eleanor nodded, as if confirming that what Mia was describing matched what she knew. "Tom came home that night very upset," Eleanor said when Mia finished. "He said it was the most honest interview Jordan had ever given, but the station executives had immediately shelved it after reviewing the footage." Did he say why? Pressure from Jordan's sponsors, he suspected. Or maybe from the NBA itself. Michael talking about panic attacks and self-doubt, about sitting in his car shaking after games. That wasn't the image they were selling. Eleanor stood up and walked to a small secretary desk in the corner of the room. She unlocked a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "After Tom died, I found this in his files," she said, returning to her seat. "It's marked Jordan Interview. 1996. She handed the envelope to Mia. It was sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. Tom left a note saying this should be given to someone who truly cares about the truth behind Jordan's story. Someone who would handle it responsibly. I think he meant for it to be opened someday." Eleanor looked directly into Mia's eyes. "Are you that person, Ms. Rodriguez?" Mia looked down at the envelope in her hands, feeling the weight of the responsibility. "I want to tell the truth," she said simply. "Whatever that is." Eleanor nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then open it when you're ready. And be careful. There were powerful people who didn't want that interview seen in 1996. Some of them are still powerful today." As Mia drove back to Chicago, the sealed envelope on the passenger seat beside her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was now part of something much bigger than just an old interview. This wasn't just about basketball or even about Michael Jordan. It was about truth and why some truths get buried. Back in her apartment that evening, Mia placed Tom Hannigan's sealed envelope on her coffee table and stared at it. Whatever was inside had been important enough for the veteran reporter to preserve for years. Her fingers traced the edges of the yellowed paper. "One step at a time," she whispered to herself. First, She wanted to watch more of the interview. She inserted the tape into her VCR and fast-forwarded to where she had left off with Dan. The screen flickered to life, showing Michael Jordan leaning forward in his chair. The public doesn't understand. The price of greatness, Jordan was saying to Hannigan. Everyone sees the wins, the dunks, the commercials. They don't see what happens behind closed doors. What does happen, Michael? Hannigan asked gently. Jordan rubbed his hands together, those famous hands that had held 6 championship trophies. The pressure builds up, he said. It's not just about winning games. It's about being perfect all the time. The perfect player, the perfect role model, the perfect businessman. Michael Jordan isn't allowed to fail. Ever. Mia watched, transfixed, as the greatest basketball player of all time described how fame had become a kind of prison. I can't go to the grocery store, Jordan continued. Can't take my kids to the park. Can't have a bad day. Can't miss a shot at the end of a game without it becoming national news. How do you handle that pressure? Hannigan asked. Jordan's laugh was hollow. Not as well as people think. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. You know those panic attacks I mentioned? They started after we won the first championship. The night before games, I sometimes couldn't sleep at all. Just lying there with my heart racing. Mia grabbed her notebook, scribbling frantically. During the '96 finals against Seattle, it got really bad, Jordan continued. Before Game 5, I was in the bathroom stall for nearly an hour, sick to my stomach from anxiety. Then I walked out, put on my jersey, and scored 36 points. Nobody knew. Not even Phil Jackson? Hannigan asked, referring to the Bulls' legendary coach. Phil suspected something was wrong, Jordan admitted. He's observant, but I never talked about it. That wasn't what men did, especially not black men in the '90s. You didn't admit weakness. You just pushed through. Is that why you're talking about it now? Hannigan asked. Partly, Jordan nodded, but also because of that promise I made. Kids, look at me like I'm superhuman, but I want them to know that even Michael Jordan bleeds, doubts, struggles, especially kids who are fighting their own battles like... The tape suddenly cut to static again, then jumped ahead. Mia swore under her breath. That was twice now that Jordan had started to talk about his promise, and twice the tape had cut out at that exact moment. Was it just old tape deteriorating, or had someone deliberately edited those sections? When the picture returned, Jordan was discussing his infamous competitive nature. People think I'm just naturally mean on the court, he was saying. The truth is, I had to create that person. The Michael Jordan who trash-talked, who punched Steve Kerr in practice, who demanded perfection from teammates. That was a character I created to push myself and everyone around me. A character? Hannigan looked surprised. Don't get me wrong, I hate losing more than I love winning. That's real. But the public Jordan, the one who seemed to have no weaknesses, that was armor I built around myself. Jordan leaned forward, his voice dropping. After games, even big wins, I'd sit alone in my car in the United Center parking lot with the engine off, sometimes for an hour or more. My hands would be shaking so bad I couldn't drive. All that adrenaline, all that pressure, it had to go. Somewhere. Did anyone know about these moments? Hannigan asked. The security guards probably wondered why my car was still there, Jordan said, with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. But no, I kept it private. The world got Michael Jordan, the basketball player. Only I knew Michael Jordan, the man. Mia paused the tape, her mind racing. This was a side of Jordan no one had seen. The invincible hero of Chicago, of the entire NBA, admitting to such vulnerability? It was revolutionary, especially for 1996, when athletes rarely discussed mental health struggles. She turned to the envelope from Eleanor Hannigan. It was time to see what Tom had left behind. Carefully, Mia peeled back the aged tape and opened the envelope. Inside were several newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and a smaller envelope. The first clipping was from the Chicago Tribune, dated October 1993, shortly after Jordan's first retirement. The headline read, "Jordan's Gambling Under Scrutiny." It detailed allegations about Jordan's high-stakes betting and questioned whether it had anything to do with his sudden retirement. The second clipping was about James Jordan's murder. Mia knew the basics of the story. Michael's father had been killed in July 1993 while napping in his car at a North Carolina rest stop. 2 teenagers had been convicted of the murder. The article speculated about whether the killing might have been connected to Michael's gambling debts, a theory that had been officially dismissed but never completely disappeared from public conversation. Tom Hannigan's handwritten notes were on WGN stationery. Mia recognized a reporter's shorthand, preparation for the Jordan interview. One page listed potential questions. Ask about panic attacks during finals night before Game 6 versus Portland in '92, relationship with James after gambling. Allegations, the promise to Marcus L. Mia paused. Marcus L. There was that name again, connected to the mysterious promise Jordan had mentioned in the interview. Another page contained what looked like a list of dates and locations. OCT, 6/93, retirement announcement. Nov, 23/93, Birmingham, visit Deck C. Baker, 18/93, Wendell Phillips Park, NC Mar, 18/95, I am back, press release, April 2/95. Marcus in hospital, Maya studied the list. Birmingham was where Jordan had played minor league baseball during his retirement. But what was Wendell Phillips Park? And who was in the hospital? The last item in the envelope was a sealed letter with "After the interview airs" written on it, in Hannigan's handwriting. Since the interview never aired, the letter had remained sealed for nearly 30 years. Mia hesitated. Should she open it? It felt like violating a journalist's private thoughts. But Tom was gone, and Eleanor had entrusted this to her specifically. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Dan. "Rodriguez, how's the digging going?" he asked without preamble. "I met with Tom Hannigan's widow," Mia said. "She confirmed the interview is real and gave me some of Tom's notes. And I've watched more of the tape. Dan, this is explosive stuff. Jordan talks about panic attacks, about breaking down after games." "Slow down," Dan interrupted. "We need to verify everything before we run with this. Can you find anyone else who worked on the interview? The camera operator? Producers? Anyone?" "I'm working on it," Mia said. Hannigan's notes mentioned someone named Marcus. Jordan made some kind of promise to him. It seems connected to his return to basketball in 1995. "Find this Marcus," Dan said, "and see if you can track down anyone from Jordan's inner circle who might corroborate what's on the tape." After hanging up, Mia turned back to the handwritten UITU list of locations. Wendell Phillips Park in North Carolina. That seemed like the next logical place to investigate. She opened her laptop and searched for the park. It was small, just a few basketball courts and a playground in a working-class neighborhood outside of Wilmington, North Carolina, close to where Jordan had grown up. But what connection did it have to the greatest basketball player of all time? And who was Marcus L.? As Mia researched flights to North Carolina, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting closer to something important. Not just about Michael Jordan, but about the gap between public heroes and private struggles. About the stories we tell versus the truths we live. About the price of greatness that remains hidden from view. Mia stared at Tom Hannigan's sealed letter marked, "After the interview airs." With trembling fingers, she carefully opened it, feeling like she was crossing some invisible line. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Hannigan's neat handwriting. "If you're reading this, the Jordan interview has finally aired. There's more to the story than what made it to broadcast. The truth about Marcus Littlefield and the promise Jordan made him deserves to be told completely. Check the storage locker at Safekeep on Western Ave, Box 227. The combination is James Jordan's birthday." Mia checked her watch. It was nearly 10 p.m., too late to visit a storage facility. But she couldn't wait until morning. She grabbed her laptop and searched for information about Marcus Littlefield. Nothing came up that connected to Michael Jordan. She tried different search combinations: Marcus Littlefield basketball, Marcus Littlefield North Carolina, Marcus Littlefield Chicago Bulls. Still nothing. Next, she returned to the interview tape, hoping for more clues. She fast-forwarded to a section she hadn't watched yet, where Jordan was discussing his relationships with teammates. "People think I was hard on my teammates because I'm naturally mean," Jordan was saying. "The truth is, I pushed them because I knew what it took to be great. I knew the sacrifices required." "Were you harder on some players than others?" Hannigan asked. "I was hardest on the ones with the most potential," Jordan admitted. "Scottie Pippen could have been satisfied being a great second option, but I saw more in him. Steve Kerr could have been just a shooter, but I needed him to be fearless." Hannigan nodded. "That famous practice where you punched Kerr." "One of my biggest regrets," Jordan interrupted. "I let the competitive fire take over. Crossed a line. But you know what? Steve stood up to me, earned my respect that day. Your teammates have always spoken highly of you, despite how hard you pushed them," Hannigan observed. Jordan's expression softened slightly. "Because they understood it wasn't personal. It was about excellence, about reaching our potential together." He paused. "There's a difference between being feared and being respected. I wanted both, but respect mattered more in the end." Mia wrote down notes, fascinated by this insight into Jordan's leadership style. But she still hadn't found any mention of Marcus or the mysterious promise. She yawned, glancing at the clock. Nearly midnight now. She needed sleep if she was going to visit the storage locker tomorrow. As she was about to turn off the tape, Jordan said something that made her freeze. "You know, Tom, not many people know this, but during our second championship run in '92, I visited a children's hospital after every home game. No cameras, no publicity, just me and those kids." "Why keep that private when it could have enhanced your image?" Hannigan asked. "Because it wasn't about my image," Jordan replied, his voice firm. "It was personal. My way of balancing things, I guess. All that fame, all that money. It had to mean something more." The tape ended there. Mia sat back, processing what she'd heard. This was yet another side of Jordan she'd never known about, the private philanthropist behind the public superstar. Early the next morning, Mia drove to Safekeep Storage on Western Avenue. The facility was old but well-maintained. At the front desk, she asked about Box 227. "That's one of our long-term rentals," the manager said, checking his computer. "Paid up through 2030. Are you the authorized person?" Mia hesitated. "I think so. The owner is Tom Hannigan." The manager nodded. "If you have the combination, you're authorized." He led her to a room filled with metal safety deposit boxes built into the wall. Box 227 was about the size of a shoebox. "I'll give you some privacy," the manager said, walking away. Mia stared at the combination lock. James Jordan's birthday. She pulled out her phone and searched. February 16th, 1936. She tried 02 Saturday to 16 to 36. Nothing. Then 216, 36. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was a manila folder, a small cassette tape labeled Marcus Interview, and a faded photograph of a young black boy in a Bulls jersey standing next to Michael Jordan. The boy was thin, almost frail, but his smile was wide as he looked up at Jordan. On the back of the photo was written, Marcus Littlefield, Wendell Phillips Park, December 18, 1993. Mia opened the folder. Inside were medical records for Marcus Littlefield, admitted to the University of North Carolina Children's Hospital in 1993 with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. There were also letters, handwritten notes from Jordan to Marcus throughout 1994 and early 1995. One letter from January 1995 caught her eye. Hey, champ, I think about our talk at the park every day. Baseball isn't filling the hole I thought it would. I keep remembering what you said about watching me fly. Maybe it's time to lace up the basketball shoes again. Treatments going better? Stay strong. MJ Mia's hands trembled as she held the letter. This was it. The connection between Marcus Littlefield and Jordan's return to basketball. The final item in the box was a newspaper clipping from April 1995. It showed Jordan at the Bulls practice facility just after his comeback. He was wearing his number 45 jersey before he returned to his famous 23. Looking closely, Mia noticed something she'd never seen in this famous photo before: a small bracelet on Jordan's wrist. The clipping was folded around a hospital bracelet, with Littlefield Marcus printed on it. Mia carefully gathered everything and placed it in her bag. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture of Michael Jordan that few had ever seen. The next morning, Mia made a list of former Bulls players who had been Jordan's teammates during the 1990s. The biggest names, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, would be tough to reach. But there were others who might be more accessible and just as valuable. She started with John Paxson, who had played alongside Jordan during the first 3 championships before becoming an executive with the Bulls. After several calls to the Bulls' front office, she was surprised when Paxson himself called her back. "I understand you're doing a story about Michael," Paxson said, his voice exactly as Mia remembered from TV broadcasts. "Yes, sir, specifically about his return to basketball in 1995 and the 1996 championship season." "Ancient history," Paxson chuckled. "But I'm happy to help if I can. For the record, though." "Thank you," Mia said, trying to sound professional despite her excitement. "I recently found an interview Michael did in June 1996 that never aired. He discussed some personal struggles that people didn't know about. Panic attacks before games, sitting in his car after games because his hands were shaking too badly to drive." There was a long pause on the line. "Where did you find this interview?" Paxson finally asked, his tone more serious. "In the WGN archives," Mia replied. "It was conducted by Tom Hannigan." Another pause. Tom was good people. One of the few reporters Michael truly trusted. "So the interview could be real?" Mia pressed. "I didn't say that," Paxson said carefully. "But Michael was complicated. More complicated than people knew. He mentioned in the interview that none of his teammates knew about his anxiety before games." "That sounds right," Paxson said slowly. "Michael was private about his struggles. We saw his intensity, his competitiveness. But vulnerability? He kept that hidden, especially from the team. Did you ever notice anything? Moments where he seemed different from his public image?" Paxson was quiet for so long that Mia thought they'd lost the connection. "There was one night," he finally said, "after we clinched the '93 championship against Phoenix. Everyone was celebrating in the locker room. I went back to grab something I'd forgotten, and Michael was just sitting there alone, in his uniform, staring at nothing. He looked exhausted. Not physically, something deeper. "What did you do?" Mia asked. "I asked if he was okay." He said, "Sometimes winning isn't enough." Then he put his game face back on and rejoined the party. Never mentioned it again. Mia scribbled notes frantically. "Mr. Paxson, did you ever hear Michael mention someone named Marcus Littlefield?" Another long pause. "No," he said finally. "That name doesn't ring a bell." After thanking Paxson, Mia tried several other former Bulls. Most didn't return her calls, but Bill Wennington, the backup center during the second three-peat, agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in the Chicago suburbs. The 7-foot Canadian was friendly but cautious as Mia explained her project. "Michael was the most driven person I've ever met," Wennington said, his massive hands dwarfing his coffee cup. "But there were moments when you'd catch a glimpse behind the curtain." "What kind of moments?" Mia asked. "Small things. He'd sometimes bring gifts for the arena staff's kids. Signed shoes, jerseys, no cameras, no publicity. Or he'd ask Phil for an extra practice day when he didn't need it, just so the rookies and bench guys could get more coaching." He mentioned in this interview that he visited children's hospitals after home games during the '92 season, Mia said. "Did you know about that?" Wennington shook his head. "That doesn't surprise me, though. Michael understood the power he had to make a kid's day. He just didn't want it in the papers." "What about his competitive side? The infamous trash-talking, punching Steve Kerr in practice?" "All real," Wennington confirmed. "But it wasn't just about basketball. Michael needed to create reasons to push himself. After the first 3 championships, winning wasn't enough motivation anymore. He needed something more." Mia leaned forward. "Like a promise to someone?" Wennington raised an eyebrow. "What do you know about that?" Mia's heart raced. "Not much. Just that he mentioned making a promise that brought him back to basketball after his father died." Wennington took a long sip of coffee, considering his words carefully. "I don't know specifics," he said finally. "But after Michael came back in '95, there was a small kid's hospital bracelet taped inside his locker. No explanation. Nobody asked about it. This confirmed what Mia had found in the storage box. The hospital bracelet belonging to Marcus Littlefield. "One more thing," Wennington said, as Mia thanked him and prepared to leave. "If Jordan talked about that promise in an interview, then what you've found is significant." Michael kept his deepest motivations private. Through more phone calls and connections, Mia finally reached Steve Kerr, now a successful NBA coach. He was polite but guarded on the phone. "I've given hundreds of interviews about Michael over the years," Kerr said. "What makes yours different?" "I found an interview where Michael talks about things he never discussed publicly," Mia explained. "Mental health struggles, a promise he made to someone named Marcus Littlefield." "Wait," Kerr interrupted. "He mentioned Marcus in an interview? Are you sure?" Mia's pulse quickened. "You know who Marcus is?" "Not exactly," Kerr said carefully. "Michael never shared details, but once, after a particularly brutal practice where he'd pushed everyone to the breaking point, I confronted him, asked him why he couldn't ease up occasionally. What did he say? He said, 'I made a promise.' When I asked who to, he just said, 'A kid who's fighting harder than any of us.' Never elaborated." The interview suggests this promise had something to do with his return to basketball in 1995, Mia said. "That would make sense," Kerr replied. "When Michael first came back, something was different. Before, he played for himself, for winning. After the comeback, there was something more. A purpose beyond basketball. As Mia thanked Kerr and ended the call, her phone immediately rang again. It was Scottie Pippen's assistant, returning her message from earlier. "Mr. Pippen has 15 minutes to speak with you tomorrow morning," the assistant said crisply. "He's intrigued by your project." After hanging up, Mia reviewed her notes with growing excitement. The pieces were fitting together. Jordan's teammates had confirmed parts of the interview, even the existence of a promise to someone fighting a serious illness. And now, she had a chance to speak with Scottie Pippen, Jordan's closest teammate during all 6 championships. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Why had the interview never aired? Who had the power to bury such an important piece of sports history? And what had happened to Marcus Littlefield? As these questions swirled in her mind, Mia made a decision. Before meeting with Pippen, she needed to see Wendell Phillips Park for herself. She booked a flight to North Carolina for that evening. The truth about Michael Jordan, not just the basketball legend, but the man, was waiting to be found in the place where he had made his promise. The small plane touched down at Wilmington International Airport just after 10 p.m. Mia rented a car and checked into a budget motel near the highway. Though exhausted from the day's discoveries, she couldn't sleep. She spread her notes across the bed, reviewing everything she'd learned. Marcus Littlefield, a sick child Jordan had met during his baseball days. A promise that somehow brought the greatest basketball player back to the NBA. And a connection to Wendell Phillips Park that none of Jordan's biographers had ever mentioned. Early the next morning, Mia followed her GPS to the park. She'd expected something significant, perhaps a well-maintained court with Jordan's name on it. Instead, she found a small neighborhood park with 2 weathered basketball hoops, their nets long gone, and a playground with peeling paint. Nothing here screamed, "Michael Jordan was here." As Mia took photos, an elderly man approached, leaning on a cane. He wore a faded Bulls cap and watched her with curious eyes. "You a reporter?" he asked. Mia nodded. "I'm researching a story about Michael Jordan." The man studied her face. "Most Jordan stories been told 100 times. What makes yours different?" "I'm trying to learn about someone named Marcus Littlefield," Mia replied. "And why this park was important to Michael Jordan." The man's expression changed immediately. "You know about Marcus?" He extended his hand. "I'm Walter Davidson. I've been taking care of this park for 30 years. As they shook hands, Mia noticed calluses that spoke of decades of physical work. "Did you know Michael Jordan?" she asked. Walter laughed. "Everyone in North Carolina claims they knew Michael. But yes, I met him several times. First when he was just a skinny kid with big dreams, then when he was famous and came back to visit." "This park doesn't look like somewhere a superstar would visit," Mia observed. "That's exactly why he came here," Walter said. "No cameras, no fans asking for autographs, just a regular court where he could remember his roots." He pointed to the farthest basketball hoop. "That's where he played with Marcus." Mia's heart skipped. "You knew Marcus Littlefield?" Walter nodded solemnly. "My great-nephew, smart kid, loved basketball even though he wasn't very good. Worshipped Michael Jordan. I found letters Jordan wrote to Marcus during his treatment," Mia said. "Was he sick?" "Leukemia," Walter confirmed, his voice softening. "Diagnosed in 1993, same year Jordan's father was killed." Mia sat on a nearby bench, and Walter joined her. "How did Marcus and Michael meet?" Walter looked out at the court, remembering. "It was after Michael quit basketball. He was playing baseball in Birmingham, but came home sometimes. One day, he just showed up here, wearing regular clothes, baseball, cap pulled low. Most kids didn't even recognize him. But Marcus did? Walter smiled. Boy nearly fainted. Even sick as he was, he challenged Michael to a game of horse. Michael let him win. Mia could imagine it. The world's greatest basketball player deliberately missing shots to make a sick child happy. They talked for hours that day, Walter continued, about basketball, about losing people they loved. Marcus had lost his mother the year before. Michael had just lost his father. And they formed a connection, Mia said. Walter nodded. Michael started visiting whenever he was in town. No publicity, no cameras, just a famous man being kind to a sick boy. Did Marcus ask Michael to return to basketball? Mia asked, remembering the letter she'd found. Walter's eyes widened slightly. How did you know about that? I'm piecing together a story, Mia said, about a promise Jordan made. Walter was quiet for a moment, then stood up. There's someone you should meet. She knows more than I do. He led Mia to a small house 3 blocks from the park. The yard was immaculate, with rose bushes lining the walkway. Walter knocked, and a moment later, an elderly black woman opened the door. Walter, what brings you? By so early? She asked, then noticed Mia. Ms. Evelyn, this young lady is asking about Marcus and Michael Jordan, Walter explained. The woman's expression became guarded. Why, after all these years? I found an interview where Jordan mentioned a promise he made, Mia explained. I believe it was to Marcus, and I'm trying to understand what happened. Ms. Evelyn studied Mia carefully before stepping aside. Come in, then. Inside, the house was filled with photographs. Many showed children at what looked like a community center. Ms. Evelyn noticed Mia looking at them. I ran the Wilmington Youth Center for 30 years, she explained. That's how I first met Michael, when he was just a local boy with big dreams. She led them to a sitting room and took a leather-bound album from a bookshelf. Marcus was my grandnephew, she said, opening the album. This is him with Michael. The photo showed the same thin boy Mia had seen in the picture from the storage locker, but this time he was on the basketball court, attempting a shot while Michael Jordan watched, smiling. When Marcus got sick, it hit our family hard, Mrs. Aquais, Evelyn continued. Then one day, Walter called saying Michael Jordan was at the park asking about Marcus. I couldn't believe it. She turned more pages, showing additional photos of Jordan with Marcus, at the hospital, at what looked like a birthday party, playing basketball. Michael visited whenever he could, Ms. Evelyn said. No publicity. He made the hospital staff promise not to tell anyone. What about the promise Marcus asked of him? Mia inquired gently. Ms. Evelyn exchanged a look with Walter, then reached into the back of the album and pulled out a letter. Michael gave me this after Marcus died. She said, handing it to Mia, said I should keep it safe. The letter was written on Chicago Bulls stationery, dated March 1995. Ms. Evelyn, I want you to know that I'm returning to basketball because of Marcus. During one of my last visits, when the treatments weren't working anymore, he asked me to go back to the Bulls. Said watching me play gave him strength. Said maybe if I could fly again, he could too. I made him a promise that day. I'm keeping it now. When you watch the games, know that I'm playing for him. Michael Jordan, Mia's hands trembled as she read the letter. This was it, the missing piece of the story. Jordan's famous comeback, announced with just the words, I'm back, had been driven by a promise to a dying child. Did Marcus see Michael play again? Mia asked. Ms. Evelyn shook her head sadly. He passed 3 weeks after Michael's return announcement, but he knew Michael was going back. That brought him peace. She turned to the last page of the album, showing a newspaper clipping of Jordan's first game back with the Bulls. Below it was a photo of a hospital room decorated with Bulls posters and a television showing the game. What most people don't know, Ms. Evelyn said, is that Michael has been supporting children's cancer research anonymously ever since, and every year he sends money to maintain this neighborhood and the park where they met. As Mia left Ms. Evelyn's house with Walter, the story was becoming clear. The greatest comeback in sports history had been motivated not by money or fame, but by a promise to a boy most of the world had never heard of. "Why hasn't this story been told before?" Mia asked Walter as they walked back toward the park. "Because Michael never wanted it told," Walter replied simply. "He didn't do it for publicity. He did it because a dying boy asked him to fly again." The flight back to Chicago gave Mia time to process everything she'd learned in North Carolina. The story was bigger than she'd imagined. Michael Jordan, the global superstar who seemed to have everything, had found purpose in a promise to a sick child that nobody knew about. Her phone rang as soon as she turned it on after landing. It was Scottie Pippen's assistant. "Mr. Pippen had to reschedule. He can meet you in an hour at his restaurant downtown, if that works." An hour later, Mia sat across from Scottie Pippen at a corner table in his upscale steakhouse. Though in his old 60s now, the seven-time NBA All-Star still carried himself with the same grace that had made him one of the greatest forwards in basketball history. "So," Pippen said, after they ordered drinks, "you found an interview where Michael talks about things he kept private." "Yes," Mia confirmed, "including struggles that didn't match his public image, panic attacks, anxiety, sitting in his car after games because he was shaking too badly to drive." Pippen nodded slowly. "And you want me to confirm if those things were real?" "If you can," Mia said, "or share anything else about the Michael Jordan people didn't see." Pippen was quiet for a long moment. "You know, being Michael's teammate wasn't easy. He demanded everything from us, every day. But what we didn't realize until later was that he demanded even more from himself." The interview suggests that his perfect image was almost like a character he created, Mia prompted. "That's exactly what it was," Pippen agreed. "There was Michael Jordan, the basketball player, the guy who never showed weakness, who trash-talked, who dominated. Then there was Michael the man, who few people ever really saw. Did you see that side of him?" Pippen smiled faintly. "Sometimes." There was one night during the '98 season, our last championship run. We were on the road in Portland. Brutal game, but we won. Back at the hotel, I couldn't sleep. So I went down to the gym around 2 a.m. He paused as the waiter delivered their drinks. Michael was there, alone, sitting on a bench, just staring at the wall. I asked if he was okay. He said, "Do you ever feel like you created something you can't control anymore?" I didn't know what to say. He told me sometimes he felt like Michael Jordan had taken over his life, that he barely remembered who he was before the fame. Mia leaned forward. That matches what he said in the interview. He talked about Michael Jordan, almost as a separate person from himself. "It got worse after we won the '96 championship," Pippen continued. "The comeback was complete. We'd set the 72-10 record. Nike sales were through the roof. But Michael seemed empty somehow." "Empty?" Mia asked. "Like winning wasn't enough anymore," Pippen explained. "I remember after Game 6 against Seattle, when we clinched the championship. Everyone was celebrating, but Michael disappeared for almost an hour. When he came back for the ceremony, his eyes were red. Most people thought it was because it was Father's Day, and he was missing his dad. But now I wonder if it was something else." The interview suggests he was thinking about retirement even then, Mia said. That, despite the comeback and championship, he was losing motivation. Pippen nodded. That sounds right. He played 2 more seasons, but his heart wasn't in it the same way. Don't get me wrong, he was still the best player in the world, but the fire was different. Did you ever hear him mention someone named Marcus Littlefield? Mia asked. Pippen's expression changed subtly. Not by name, but after his comeback in '95, sometimes when we were facing a tough game, he'd touch his chest, right where his jersey number was, and mutter something. Once I asked what he was doing, and he just said, "Remembering a promise." Mia felt a chill. That matched what she'd learned, Jordan writing Marcus's name inside his jersey next to his father's initials. There's another thing from the interview, Mia said. Jordan talked about having nightmares where he was playing in an empty arena, unable to stop even though there was no one watching. Pippen's eyes widened slightly. He told you about those? He told Tom Hannigan in the interview, Mia corrected. You knew about them? We roomed together on the road sometimes, Pippen explained. There were nights he'd wake up sweating, breathing hard. Once, I asked what he was dreaming about. He said he kept dreaming he was stuck on a basketball court, playing a game that never ended, while everyone he cared about gradually left the arena until he was completely alone. The description was so similar to what Jordan had said in the interview that Mia felt certain now. The tape was authentic. This was the real Michael Jordan speaking. Why do you think the interview never aired? She asked. Pippen shrugged. Sponsors, probably. Jordan was a global brand by then. Billions of dollars in shoes, clothes, movies, endorsements. The image of Michael Jordan was worth too much to show any cracks. Even if showing those cracks might have helped people? Mia asked. Especially then, Pippen said. This was 1996. Athletes didn't talk about mental health, about vulnerability, about being human behind the jersey. As their conversation continued, Pippen shared more memories of Jordan. Small moments when the mask slipped, when the invincible basketball god showed glimpses of the man beneath. There was this custodian at the United Center, Pippen recalled. His son had cancer. None of us knew except Michael. He arranged for the best doctors, paid for all the treatments, never said a word about it. Not to the press, not even to us. Like, what he did for the community in North Carolina, Mia murmured. Pippen raised an eyebrow. You know about that too? I visited Wendell Phillips Park yesterday, Mia explained. Met people who knew about his connection to Marcus. You've done your homework, Pippen said, looking impressed. But why now? Why dig up this story after all these years? Because I think it matters, Mia replied. Not just for basketball history, but for people who struggle behind perfect images. For kids who think their heroes never doubt or hurt or break. Pippen was quiet for a long moment. If you run this story, be prepared for pushback. There are still powerful people who want to protect the Jordan brand exactly as it is. Who would have had the power to bury the interview in 1996? Mia asked. Follow the money, Pippen advised. Who made billions from Jordan's perfect image? That's who had the most to lose from him appearing vulnerable. As they finished their meeting, Pippen stood to leave but paused. One more thing. After our last championship in '98, there was a private team gathering. No cameras, no reporters. Michael gave a speech I'll never forget. He said, "Basketball gave me a stage, but it never defined me. The most important promises I kept were the ones nobody saw me make." He looked directly into Mia's eyes. If Jordan talked about that promise to Marcus in your interview, then what you found is more significant than you realize. It's the key to who he really was beneath the jersey. After leaving the restaurant, Mia walked along the Chicago River, thinking about everything she'd learned. The story was coming together piece by piece. Jordan's secret struggle with anxiety, his promise to a dying boy named Marcus, and the forces that kept these truths hidden for decades. But significant gaps remained. What exactly happened to the interview? Who ordered it buried? And why was it preserved rather than destroyed? As night fell over Chicago, the city where Jordan had become a legend, Mia made her decision. It was time to find the people who had worked on the interview itself, the camera operators, producers, and executives who had witnessed Michael Jordan's truth and then hidden it from the world. The next morning, Mia arrived at the WGN station early. She had a list of names she needed to track down. Anyone who might have worked on the Jordan interview in 1996. Dan caught her at the coffee machine. "How's the Jordan story coming?" "It's big, Dan. Bigger than I thought." She quickly filled him in on her discoveries in North Carolina and her conversation with Scottie Pippen. Dan whistled low. So Jordan's comeback was because of a promise to a sick kid, and no one's ever reported this? Not just that, Mia added. The interview reveals Jordan struggled with anxiety and panic attacks during the height of his career. He maintained a perfect public image while breaking down in private. "If this is true, it's Pulitzer material," Dan said. "But we need to nail down why the interview was shelved. Have you found anyone who worked on it?" "That's my next step. I need access to WGN's employee records from 1996. 2 hours later, Mia Siuret had a list of 5 names: 2 camera operators, a lighting technician, a producer, and a sound engineer who had been credited on Tom Hannigan's shows that month. The first 3 names led nowhere. One had died, one had moved overseas, and one couldn't remember the specific interview among hundreds she'd worked on. But the 4th call connected. "Jim Vasquez speaking. Mr. Vasquez, my name is Mia Rodriguez. I'm a reporter with WGN. I'm researching and I interviewed Tom Hannigan conducted with Michael Jordan in June 1996. A long pause followed. "After all these years, someone finally found it," Jim said quietly. Mia's heart raced. "You remember the interview? Remember it? It was the most honest interview with an athlete I've ever witnessed. And the most disappointing moment of my career? When they killed it. They arranged to meet at a diner in Evanston. Jim Vasquez was in his 70s now, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades behind a camera. When Mia mentioned she had found the actual interview tape, his eyes widened. "You've seen it? The whole thing?" "Parts are damaged," Mia explained. "There are sections where Jordan starts talking about a promise he made, but the tape cuts out." Jim nodded slowly. "That doesn't surprise me. I always wondered if they'd tamper with the master tape." "What exactly happened that day?" Mia asked. Jim stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "It was supposed to be a standard interview. Michael had just won the championship after his comeback. Tom had interviewed him many times before. But it turned into something else. Michael was different that day," Jim confirmed. "Usually he was guarded with the media, all charm and practiced answers. But that day, I don't know. Something had shifted." Tom's notes mentioned it was filmed on June 16, 1996, Mia said. "Father's Day?" Jim nodded. 3 years after his dad was murdered. Maybe that's why he opened up. "What do you remember about the content of the interview?" "He talked about things athletes just didn't discuss back then. The panic attacks, the pressure of fame, the emptiness after achieving everything. And yes, he mentioned a promise he made to a sick boy, though he didn't go into detail while I was there." "Do you know why the interview never aired?" Jim's expression darkened. "Oh, I know exactly why. We were still breaking down the set when Richard Warner came storming in." "Richard Warner," executive producer. "He watched 5 minutes of the footage and ordered everything shut down. said the interview would never see the light of day. Had security escort the tapes to his office. Mia scribbled notes frantically. Did he say why? Not directly to us, but I overheard him on the phone with someone. He kept saying, "It undermines the entire brand, and Nike will pull millions in advertising." Another piece clicked into place. The perfect Jordan image was worth billions to his sponsors. There's something else, Jim added. We had 2 cameras running that day, the main one and a second angle. If parts of your tape are damaged, the second tape might have those sections intact. Do you know what happened to it? Richard took both tapes, but Tom was smart. He kept backup recordings of important interviews. Did you check his personal archives? Mia shook her head. Just the storage locker he left instructions about. Tom had a cabin in Wisconsin, used it as a retreat to work on big stories. If he preserved anything, it might be there. This was a new lead, but Mia needed more information about Richard Warner first. A quick internet search revealed he had retired from broadcasting in 2008 and now lived in Lake Forest, one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs. Finding his address wasn't difficult. Getting him to talk would be the challenge. The Warner home was a sprawling mansion behind a wrought iron gate. Mia pressed the intercom button. "Warner residence," answered a formal voice. "My name is Mia Rodriguez. I'm a reporter with WGN. I'd like to speak with Mr. Warner about an interview with Michael Jordan from 1996. A long silence followed. Then, "Mr. Warner is not available for comment." Mia was about to leave when a car pulled into the driveway. The gate opened automatically, and Mia stepped aside as a man in his 40s drove through. He stopped and rolled down his window. "Did I hear you say something about a Jordan interview from 1996? He asked. "Yes," Mia confirmed. "I found one that never aired. I'm trying to understand why." He studied her for a moment. "I'm David Warner, Richard's son." He seemed to make a decision. "Pull around back. We should talk." In the pool house behind the mansion, David Warner explained that he was a documentary filmmaker specializing in sports history. "My father rarely discussed his work at home," he said. "But the Jordan interview was different. It's the only time I saw him truly conflicted about a decision." "He was the one who killed it?" Mia asked. David nodded, after pressure from several very powerful people. But he kept the tapes. Said someday people would be ready for the real Jordan story. "Do you know where those tapes might be now?" After Dad retired, he brought home boxes of materials from his office. "They're in storage here somewhere." David paused. "Look, my father made his choices. But if you're really trying to tell this story, the true story of why Jordan came back to basketball and what it cost him, I want to help." "Why?" Mia asked. "Because it matters," David replied simply. "It matters that the greatest athlete of all time was also human. It matters that his comeback wasn't just about winning, but about keeping a promise to a dying child." As they talked further, Mia realized that finding the missing footage was now possible. Between Tom Hannigan's cabin and the Warner family storage, the complete interview might still exist. But time was running short. Dan had given her just 2 weeks, and she'd already used half of that. And a bigger question loomed. Even if she found everything, would the powers that had buried this story 29 years ago allow it to be told now? David Warner proved to be an unexpected ally. The next morning, he called Mia with news. "I found something in my father's storage, a box labeled Jordan 96, complete. It has what looks like the original interview tapes." They met at a small editing studio where David rented space for his documentary work. The box contained 3 videotapes, each labeled with the WGN logo and Jordan Hannigan interview, June 16, 1996. This one says, "Camera 2, Mia noted excitedly. That's the second angle Jim Vasquez mentioned. David loaded the tape into a professional-grade player connected to a monitor. The image showed a different angle of the same interview setup, with Jordan in profile. Let's find the sections that were damaged on your copy," David suggested. Mia described the points where her tape had cut out, specifically when Jordan began discussing his promise to Marcus. They fast-forwarded to approximately the right timestamp. "There," Mia pointed. "This is where it cut out on my copy." In this version, the footage was intact. Jordan leaned forward, looking directly at Hannigan. "After my father's murder, I was lost," Jordan was saying. "Baseball was an escape, but it wasn't filling the hole. Then I met this kid, Marcus, at a playground in North Carolina. 11 years old with leukemia." Jordan's expression softened as he continued. "This kid barely had the strength to shoot a basketball, but he wouldn't quit. Reminded me of myself when I was young." "And you formed a connection with him?" Hannigan asked. Jordan nodded. "I started visiting him at the hospital when I could. No cameras, no publicity, just me and Marcus talking about basketball, about life." "What was the promise you made him?" Hannigan asked gently. Jordan took a deep breath. "His treatments weren't working anymore. Doctors had given him maybe 6 months. One day he asked me, 'Why did you really quit basketball?' No one had ever asked me that directly." "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that after Dad died, basketball didn't seem important anymore. That I was trying to find purpose again." Jordan's eyes glistened. "And Marcus, this kid facing death, looked at me and said, 'When I'm in pain from the treatments, I watch videos of you playing. Watching you fly makes me feel like I can fly too.'" Jordan paused, gathering himself. "He asked me to go back to basketball. Said it would give him strength for whatever time he had left. How do you say no to that?" "So that's why you returned in 1995, Hannigan said. "I promised Marcus I'd play again. That I'd win another championship. For him and for my father." Jordan's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed deep emotion. "Before every game of the 95 to 96 season, I wrote Marcus's name inside my jersey, right next to my father's initials. Nobody knew." "Did Marcus see you win the championship?" Jordan shook his head. "He died 3 weeks after I announced my comeback. But he knew I was returning, that I was keeping my promise." "That must have been difficult, playing through that loss," Hannigan observed. "It gave me purpose," Jordan replied. "Before, I played for myself, for winning. After that, I played for something bigger. Something that mattered more than trophies or shoe deals." The interview continued, with Jordan describing how the experience had changed his perspective on his career and fame. "Some people might remember me for the championships, or the shoes, or the dunks," Jordan concluded. "But when I'm gone, I hope there are a few people who remember me for the promises I kept when no one was watching." As the tape ended, Mia wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. David seemed equally moved. "My father kept this hidden for 29 years, he said quietly. "Now I understand why it was so controversial. This isn't the Michael Jordan people thought they knew." "It's a better one," Mia replied. "More human, more relatable." They spent hours reviewing all 3 tapes, restoring the complete interview. The full picture that emerged was of a complex man who had created a public persona that eventually became a prison. A man who found meaning not in fame or fortune, but in a private promise to a dying child. Jordan described nights when he struggled to sleep, haunted by his father's murder. He talked about fame as a double-edged sword, that gave him everything and took away his privacy, his peace, sometimes even his love for basketball. "There were days I hated the game," Jordan admitted in one segment. "Hated that it had taken over my life. Then I'd remember Marcus watching from his hospital bed, finding strength in watching me play, and I'd push through." He described a recurring nightmare where he was playing in an empty arena, unable to stop even though there was no one watching. "I think it was my fear that without basketball, I'd disappear. That Michael Jordan the person would be swallowed by Michael Jordan the brand." In the most revealing segment, Jordan described his panic attacks before crucial games. Game 6 of the '93 Finals against Phoenix. "I threw up twice before tip-off," he confessed. "My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tie my shoes. Then I'd walk out of that locker room and somehow transform into the Michael Jordan everyone expected. Fearless, invincible." "How did you make that transformation?" Hannigan asked. "I created a character," Jordan explained. "The public Michael Jordan became a role I played, supremely confident, never vulnerable, always in control. That's who people needed me to be." "And who were you when the cameras were off?" "Just a man trying to make sense of it all," Jordan said softly. "A son who missed his father. A friend who couldn't save a dying boy. Someone searching for meaning beyond just winning." After reviewing the complete interview, Mia and David turned to Tom Hannigan's notes, which David's father had preserved along with the tapes. They detailed Hannigan's fight to get the interview aired. "Network executives pulled it immediately," Hannigan had written. "Richard says Nike threatened to pull all advertising if it airs. Says Jordan's agent called personally to block it. Says the NBA doesn't want their biggest star talking about panic attacks and nightmares." Another note read, "Jordan called today. Says he understands why they won't air it. Says maybe the world isn't ready yet for athletes to be human. Asked me to keep the tapes safe." "Someday," he said. Mia checked her watch. Nearly midnight. She had promised to update Dan in the morning. "There's one more place we should check," she told David. "Tom Hannigan's cabin in Wisconsin. His widow mentioned it, and Jim said Tom kept backup recordings. There." "It's about 3 hours north," David said. "We could go tomorrow." But when they called Eleanor Hannigan in the morning for the cabin's address, she sounded worried. "Someone called asking about Tom's archives yesterday," she said. "They claimed to be from WGN, but when I called the station to confirm, no one had heard of them." "Did you give them the cabin address?" Mia asked, suddenly anxious. "No, but they seemed to already know about it. They were very interested in any tapes Tom might have kept there." Mia and David exchanged alarmed looks. Someone else was now searching for the Jordan interview, someone who hadn't identified themselves truthfully. "We need to get to that cabin. Today," David said, after Mia hung up. As they drove north into Wisconsin, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were in a race. The story that had been buried for nearly 3 decades was finally emerging. But forces still wanted it kept secret. The small cabin was tucked among pine trees near a lake. It looked undisturbed as they pulled up, but Mia noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt driveway. "Someone's been here recently," she whispered as they approached cautiously. Inside, the cabin was neat, but showed signs of a hasty search. Desk drawers left partially open, books not quite straight on shelves. In the small office area, an empty space on a shelf was labeled Jordan Files. "We're too late," David said, running his hand over the empty shelf. But Mia wasn't ready to give up. Tom was a careful journalist. If these files were important, he wouldn't have left them somewhere obvious. They searched the cabin methodically, looking for hiding places. Mia noticed a loose floorboard beneath the worn rug, and pried it up to reveal a small metal box. Inside was a cassette tape labeled "Jordan, Marcus Promise, My Copy," and a sealed envelope marked, "If the interview ever airs." Her hands shaking slightly, Mia opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Tom Hannigan's handwriting. The truth finds its way into the light eventually. Michael Jordan gave the most honest interview of his career on June 16, 1996. He spoke about his struggles, his doubts, and, most importantly, about a promise he made to a boy named Marcus Littlefield that changed basketball history. If you're reading this, someone finally had the courage to tell the real story. Back in Chicago, Mia and David carefully transferred the contents of Tom Hannigan's cassette tape to digital format. It contained Hannigan's personal recording of key moments from the interview, along with his own voice notes. Michael Jordan revealed something today that changes how we'll understand his career forever. Hannigan's voice explained on the tape. His return to basketball wasn't just about winning more championships. It was about keeping a promise to a dying child. As they listened to the entire recording, more details emerged about Jordan's relationship with Marcus and how it had transformed his perspective on his career and fame. "This is the final piece," Mia said when the tape ended. "We have the complete story now." The next morning, she presented everything to Dan in the conference room at WGN. The restored interview footage played on a large screen as Dan watched in stunned silence. "This is remarkable," he said when it finished. "The greatest comeback in sports history was motivated by a promise to a sick child no one ever knew about. And then buried for nearly 30 years, Mia added. "I want to publish the full story, Dan. The interview, the context, everything." Dan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It's Pulitzer material, no question. But we need to be prepared for pushback. Have you contacted Jordan's representatives?" "Not yet," Mia admitted. "I wanted to have the complete story first." "Do it today," Dan instructed. "Give them a chance to comment before we publish, and we should have legal review everything. This will make waves." Mia drafted an email to Jordan's management team explaining her discovery of the interview and requesting comment. The response came within hours, a terse message stating the tape was alleged and unverified and warning against publication. But Mia had done her homework. She had verification from multiple sources, including former Bulls players, the camera operator, the Littlefield family, and Tom Hannigan's meticulous records. She had the physical tapes themselves. She worked through the night, writing and rewriting her article. The headline she chose was simple but powerful. "Michael Jordan's lost interview from 1996 was just released. What he said changed everything." The article began, "In June 1996, days after winning his fourth NBA championship, Michael Jordan sat down for an interview that would never air. In it, he revealed the true reason for his famous comeback to basketball after his first retirement. A promise he made to a dying child named Marcus Littlefield. That interview, buried for nearly 3 decades, has finally come to light." The piece continued, weaving together the interview revelations, context from Jordan's teammates, and the story of Marcus Littlefield. Mia described Jordan's struggles with anxiety and the pressure of fame, his private visits to children's hospitals, and the depth of his grief after his father's murder. She explained how Jordan had created a public persona that became increasingly separate from his private self, and how his promise to Marcus had given him renewed purpose when basketball alone no longer motivated him. The final draft, approved by WGN's legal team, was scheduled to publish online the next morning. Mia barely slept that night, alternating between excitement and anxiety about how the world would receive this new understanding of Michael Jordan. She wasn't prepared for what happened next. At 6 a.m., her phone rang. It was Dan. "The story's been pulled," he said, his voice tense. "Corporate called. They've received cease and desist letters from Jordan's attorneys, Nike, and the NBA." "But we have verification," Mia protested. "Multiple sources confirmed." "This isn't about verification," Dan interrupted. "It's about power. They're threatening major lawsuits, pulling all advertising. The station can't risk it." Mia felt like she'd been punched. After all her work, the same forces that buried the interview in 1996 were doing it again. Her phone buzzed with another call. David Warner. "My father received a call this morning," he said without preamble. "Someone threatening legal action if he's involved in releasing the Jordan tapes. Mia, they're trying to bury this story again." "WGN already pulled it," she replied, her voice hollow. "Then release it another way," David urged. "I'm a documentary filmmaker. Let's use the footage, create something they can't stop." "But the legal threats, truth is a defense," David insisted. "Everything we've found is real." Jordan did make that promise to Marcus. He did suffer from anxiety behind his perfect image. The world deserves to know the true story of his comeback. Over the next week, Mia and David worked frantically, pulling together footage, interviews, and evidence into a short documentary. They interviewed Ms. Evelyn and Walter from North Carolina, again getting their stories on camera. They added context from basketball historians and mental health experts who explained why Jordan's revelations would have been groundbreaking in 1996 and why they still mattered now. The day before they planned to release the documentary online, Mia received an anonymous email with a link to a website that had published a hit piece on her. It called her a fame-seeking reporter, pushing fabricated tapes and false narratives about Michael Jordan. Similar stories appeared in sports, websites, and social media, all questioning Mia's credibility and motives. Some suggested she had doctored the interview footage. Others claimed she had misrepresented Jordan's relationship with Marcus Littlefield. "They're trying to discredit you before the story even comes out," David observed grimly. "Classic damage control." Despite the attacks, they released the documentary on David's website under the title, "The Promise: Michael Jordan's Untold Story." Within hours, it had thousands of views. By the end of the day, hundreds of thousands. Sports networks picked up the story, debating the authenticity of the footage and the implications for Jordan's legacy. Former Bulls staff members and players were divided in their public comments. Some confirmed parts of the story, while others claimed no knowledge of Jordan's anxiety or his connection to Marcus. Then, 3 days after the documentary's release, came the most devastating blow. Jordan's representatives issued a formal statement. The recently released footage purporting to show Michael Jordan discussing private health matters and relationships with fans is not authentic. Mr. Jordan categorically denies making the statements attributed to him in this fabricated interview. Legal action is being pursued against all parties involved in its creation and distribution. The statement was devastating. Without Jordan's confirmation, doubt crept into public discussion of the documentary. Sports commentators began questioning the footage, pointing to small inconsistencies that could be explained by tape deterioration. Mia's professional reputation was under attack. She received hate mail from Jordan fans. David's documentary website was hit with denial of service attacks. Their story was unraveling. "Maybe we were wrong," Mia said to David one evening, after another day of defending their work. "Maybe we shouldn't have released it." "We weren't wrong," David insisted. "Everything checks out. The people in North Carolina confirmed Jordan's relationship with Marcus. The camera operator verified the interview." Tom Hannigan's notes corroborate everything. We're telling the truth, but without Jordan himself confirming it, people will always doubt. As if answering her despair, Mia's phone rang with an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Is this Mia Rodriguez?" asked a male voice she didn't recognize. "Yes. My name is Marcus Littlefield." Mia nearly dropped the phone. "Marcus? But the records show that I died in 1995? The man chuckled softly. "The doctors gave me months to live, but treatments improved. I survived." Mia put the phone on speaker so David could hear. "Mr. Littlefield, can you prove who you are?" "I understand your caution," he replied. "I've been watching your documentary and the backlash against it. I've stayed private all these years because that's what Michael wanted. But I can't let them discredit you for telling the truth." He described details about Jordan's visits that matched exactly what Ms. Evelyn had told Mia. He knew about the hospital bracelet Jordan had kept. He even recounted specific conversations that Jordan had mentioned in the interview. "I'm a basketball coach now," Marcus explained, "working with kids in Charlotte. Michael helped make that possible. He's supported me quietly for decades." "Would you be willing to go on record?" Mia asked, hardly daring to hope. "To confirm your relationship with Jordan and the promise he made?" "That's why I'm calling," Marcus replied. "It's time for the truth. Michael kept his promise to me all those years ago. Now I need to honor what he really did, not just as a basketball player, but as a man." The next day, Mia and David flew to Charlotte, North Carolina, to meet Marcus Littlefield in person. The man who greeted them at a small community center gym was in his early 40s, tall and thin with an easy smile. He showed them photographs, letters, and memorabilia from his 3-decade relationship with Jordan. Most importantly, he showed them a handwritten letter Jordan had sent him just after his comeback announcement in 1995. "Marcus, I'm keeping my promise. When you watch me play, know that every time I leave the ground, I'm flying for both of us. Stay strong. MJ." With Marcus Littlefield's testimony, the tide of public opinion began to shift. His story was too detailed, too consistent with everything else they had uncovered, to be fabricated. Other figures from Jordan's past began coming forward, confirming pieces of the story. The final validation came when a nurse who had worked at the North Carolina Children's Hospital in the 1990s shared a photograph she had kept private for decades. Michael Jordan sitting beside Marcus's hospital bed, teaching him how to hold a basketball properly. The date stamp on the photo matched exactly with the timeline they had constructed. As their story gained credibility, the attacks against Mia and David gradually subsided. The truth was emerging, piece by piece, about the real Michael Jordan and the promise that had changed basketball history. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Would Jordan himself ever acknowledge the truth? The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty United Center as Mia stepped onto the court. The cavernous arena was silent, a stark contrast to the roaring crowds that filled it during Bulls games. Her footsteps echoed as she walked to center court, where someone had asked her to meet. She checked her watch. It had been 3 weeks since Marcus Littlefield had come forward, confirming the story of Jordan's promise. The documentary had gone viral, reaching millions of viewers worldwide. Basketball fans debated its revelations, but increasingly, the consensus was that the story was true. Just that morning, Sports Illustrated had published a feature article titled "The Real Jordan, Re-Examining the Legend." ESPN was planning a special program. Even Jordan's most vocal defenders had grown quieter as more evidence emerged, supporting Mia's reporting. But from Jordan himself, silence. "Ms. Rodriguez, The voice behind her made Mia turn around. Standing at the edge of the court was Michael Jordan. At 62, his hair was gray now, his face lined with age, but his presence was still commanding. He wore a simple black sweater and jeans, his hands in his pockets as he walked toward her. "Mr. Jordan," she said, her heart racing. "Thank you for meeting me." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy." "I just wanted to tell the true story," Mia replied. "About your comeback, about Marcus, and my panic attacks, my doubts, the moments I hated basketball." His tone wasn't angry, just direct. "You thought the world needed to know all that too?" "I think it matters," Mia said simply. "Not just for basketball history, but for people who struggle behind perfect images." Jordan was silent for a moment, looking around the empty arena where he had created so many legendary moments. "Walk with me," he finally said. They moved slowly along the sideline, the place where Jordan had once soared and scored and changed basketball forever. "For nearly 30 years, I've protected that interview," he said. "Not because I was ashamed of what I said, but because I wasn't sure the world was ready to hear it." "And now?" Mia asked. "Now things are different. Athletes talk about mental health, about being human behind the highlights." He looked at her directly. "But that doesn't mean I was ready for someone to make that choice for me. I'm sorry if—" "Let me finish," Jordan said, his voice firm but not unkind. "When I first heard about your documentary, I was angry. Had my people issue that denial statement. But then Marcus called me." "He did?" Jordan nodded. "Said you'd found the truth and were telling it responsibly. Said maybe it was finally time for people to know." They reached center court again, and Jordan stopped, looking up at the championship banners hanging from the rafters. "You know, those banners tell one story. The shoes, the commercials, the highlight reels, they tell another. But neither tells the complete truth." "What is the complete truth?" Mia asked. "That even Michael Jordan is human," he said simply. "That I had doubts, that I broke down sometimes, that what drove me wasn't just winning, but a promise to a dying boy who never got to see me win that fourth ring." "Except Marcus didn't die," Mia pointed out. Jordan smiled for the first time. "The greatest miracle in my life. The doctors had given up hope. But somehow, he pulled through. We kept it private all these years, his choice as much as mine. He's inspiring kids now," Mia said, "just like you inspired him." "Full circle," Jordan nodded. "That's what matters in the end. Not the championships or the shoes or the money. The promises we keep when no one's watching." He turned to face her directly. "I've decided to acknowledge the interview. Confirm it's real. All of it. The panic attacks, the doubts, the promise to Marcus." Mia felt a wave of relief and vindication. "Why now?" "Because maybe it's time people knew the complete story," Jordan said. "Not just about me, but about how we view our heroes, how we expect perfection and forget the humanity." He looked out over the empty arena again. "For years, people thought they knew me because they saw me fly. But sometimes the most important journeys happen when our feet are on the ground." "Thank you," Mia said, emotion making her voice catch, "for trusting me with your story." "I didn't. At first," Jordan admitted with a slight smile. "But you did your homework, verified every detail, told the truth with respect." He extended his hand. "My father would have said you're good people." As they shook hands, Jordan added, "There's something else you should know. All these years, I've been funding children's cancer research anonymously. Millions of dollars, no publicity. Marcus helps run the foundation now." "That wasn't in the interview," Mia said. "Some things I still kept private," Jordan replied. "But now, with the truth coming out about everything else, I'm ready to make that public too. To show that the real legacy isn't just about basketball." The next day, Michael Jordan released a statement confirming the authenticity of the 1996 interview. He acknowledged his struggles with anxiety during his career, the burden of his perfect public image, and most importantly, his promise to Marcus Littlefield. "Basketball gave me a global stage," his statement concluded, "but my greatest achievement wasn't scoring points or winning championships. It was keeping a promise to a brave young man when no one was watching." The story dominated sports news worldwide. Athletes across different sports praised Jordan's honesty, with many sharing their own struggles with mental health and the pressure of fame. The interview footage, now officially acknowledged, was viewed by millions. For Mia, the professional validation was satisfying, but it was the personal impact that meant more. She received thousands of messages from people who found hope in learning that even Michael Jordan, the symbol of athletic perfection, had struggled and doubted. A week later, Mia received a small package at the WGN office. Inside was a basketball, with Jordan's signature and a note. "For having the courage to tell the complete story. Some truths take time. MJ." As she placed the ball on her desk, Mia thought about the journey that had begun with a dusty videotape in the station's archives. She had uncovered not just a hidden chapter of sports history, but a deeper truth about heroes and humanity. The greatest comeback in basketball hadn't been driven by fame or fortune, but by a promise made when no cameras were rolling. And that, Mia realized, was the most inspiring story of all. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know which part of the world you're tuning in from. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring content like this. We share new stories regularly that blend sports history with powerful human moments. Please consider sharing this video with your friends and family. Stories like these remind us that even our greatest heroes face struggles and doubts, and by sharing them, we spread both kindness and awareness about the importance of mental health and keeping our promises. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back soon with another compelling story that touches the heart and inspires the soul. Until next time.